It comes and goes. We're out here chasing a feeling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Becky McNattin, along with host Tara Martini. We are glad to have you listening today as we live and share stories of mental health. Tara.
Becky.
I have taken a very unscientific poll this last week.
Love this.
I decided to count one full day, on how many times I was asked the question of how are you? And want to know what it was?
Oh my God, my guess would be like 10 times.
30
Holy
times.
cannoli.
Yeah, and it happened everywhere. It happened in the checkout line. It happened in an elevator. It happened all through my workday. I passed two different people in a hallway, and some of the people that asked, how are you, were total strangers.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that it's rooted in kindness.
Mm-hmm.
We humans, I believe, care about each other, and we are socially curious beings. So I get why we might be interested in saying hello to people and asking questions. But this phrase, along with others, seems to be so chronic and chronically used that I don't really get what it means anymore. And if we consider it a social pleasantry, why don't we just say hello then? In my recent week, as I started doing this poll, I also noticed this happening all sorts of times around me. We respond with things like, I'm fine, I'm okay, pretty good, oh, all right.
Yeah, very prescribed answers.
Yeah, and what do these phrases even mean? And then, Tara, we ask it back. Like immediately. I asked it back, seriously.
Which is
what?
So sad.
I even said, why am I doing this? And after one exchange, I got into my car and I kid you not, I got mad at myself because I had been having an incredible day so far. I had got awesome news on something. I was really excited about another thing I was planning. And I had a really kind text from a friend that morning. And when the person said, how are you? I said, without even thinking, not bad. I said not bad. When I could have said countless other things that would have highlighted my cool moments.
Why do you think you did that?
It got me pondering the concept of how are you so deeply because I don't know.
Right.
And then the impact of this. When we see people in passing, we don't think twice about asking it. It just comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And it has made me question, do we actually mean it? So thoughts on this?
Oh, one, I think we've been so programmed to do this, which is why, like you said, you are a wordsmith, you are a lover of language. So for Becky, for you to say, not bad, which didn't match your insides, is very profound to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it honestly is just we are programmed. It is something now with that idea of being programmed. Then how authentic and genuine are we?
Right.
When it literally just comes out of our mouth. It also made me think of when people say, I love you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so programmed and whatever is. How often do we say that? And really think about what that means.
Right.
Right.
Well,
and we do that a lot.
Yeah. And then in addition to the inconsequential nature of the phrase itself, I've been thinking about the mental health impact of using empty questions like this. As you say, it's sort of just reactionary. We're not thinking about it. And what is the mental health consequence of moments of connection in using this phrase?
Well, for sure. And it's that piece of when you're using that phrase is, have you ever, when someone has said it, I have had a couple of times where I've thought, do you even care?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
It just kind of came out of your mouth. Do you even care how I am? And what you're hoping is for one of those prescribed things, because God forbid, I really tell you how I feel.
Yep. Great discussion. I cannot wait to talk more. Right now, we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned as we walk through the emotional impact of empty questions and what you can think about and ask instead. Feels Out Loud. We'll be right back.
You don't nothing to lose. In a world full of strangers,
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I am Becky McNattin, along with Tara Martini. Let's dive right back into how are you and other questions that feel emotionally empty sometimes. All right, everyone. Empty questions refer to any question that lacks substance or solicits an artificial or surface response. Every one of us has used these,
We have.
and we have been asked them. So, Tara, why do we do this?
Well, so this was super fun to research because I looked at it from an angle of like us as Americans and then how do other cultures feel and
Mhm.
why do they do what they do so that we can get more of a global look at like, is this a human thing? Is this by country
Mhm.
or culture?
Sure.
So, an overarching thing was this idea that we do it because it shows we care for others, and to show them we care, we ask a bit more than hello.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say hello and how are you, then I feel more caring,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that I care more for that person.
Yeah.
Even though, do we really, or is it just this prescribed thing? When looking
Good point.
so I looked at Scandinavia, Japan, and France, and I'll be really fast. So interesting. In Scandinavian cultures, asking how are you from a stranger is seen as intrusive, and a simple
Interesting.
hello is often preferred, which I kind of
It's just
love.
the pleasantry. It's just
Yeah.
a greeting.
It's just a hello, because it is true. Like to a stranger, why would you be like, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
In Japan, super interesting. Depending on the social hierarchy, asking about someone's well being might be considered inappropriate unless there's a close relationship. Again, them honoring that if you're going to go below the surface and ask how a human is doing, that deserves to be a relationship you've already fostered and started,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay.
It's unfair if you just ask a stranger. And
Yeah.
this made so much sense.
Yep.
In France, where I've applied this to myself because I've spent time there, this quote stuck with me and I love it so much. Fellowship is life.
Mm. Yeah.
If we could just soak
Isn't
that
it
in.
true? Yep.
French people simply don't engage in small talk or long conversations with strangers. So friendships and sharing are seen as much more of an intimate thing. For instance, like in the American culture. So when I spent time there, I remember very quickly I learned. So every morning I'd wake up and I'd see the people on the property and be like, good morning, how are you?
Uh-huh.
And I went to a dinner party and one of my, like, probably the fifth question I asked is like, so what do you do for a living?
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned from a new French friend, like, never ask about work because it's ingenuine.
Mm.
And then two, don't have small talk because it just seems shallow, right? Like, do you really care?
Yeah.
Where you're going to leave those questions for people that you have a close connection with, which I
Yeah.
was like mind blowing. And then lastly, I got to represent the Italians because that's me. We love it. It shows an interest in connection, even with strangers.
Hmm.
It's that idea of like, then we're bonding more,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether we know someone or not, we're showing
Or
interest.
you're not.
So fascinating, sadly, but I do find this ironic that of all the countries I looked at, America was like the most shallow and like just where we weren't really looking at the deep,
Yeah.
important layers.
Well, it's really interesting to highlight that and the spectrum of how people might respond to this culturally. It makes me think about the consequence of using questions like, how are you? I know it's sort of boring and it doesn't really elicit an honest response. But when we think about deeper than that, the relationship with ourselves and other people,
Hmm.
that really gets into that mental health aspect. Is there a time that someone asked you, how are you? And you wondered how to answer, Tara?
Totally.
Probably yesterday.
All the time.
Yeah. Well, how did you make the choice on your response?
So I feel anyone who, and I know this has come up several times already, so I apologize for the redundancy, but anyone who's on a grief journey, I ask myself internally, I've never asked myself internally more than since I've been on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Someone will ask, and I literally think to myself, should I tell them the truth? For people that I know and I'm close to,
Mm-hmm.
I will say, today's a hard grief day.
Mm-hmm.
Today I'm sad, you know. And then I think for most of the time, strangers, like I will lie. right? Or I'll say I'm fine or okay, but I'll never say good.
Yeah.
So it's that idea of, do you answer differently depending on strangers? And
Yep.
are there other circumstances other than grief where
Yeah.
we do have that internal dialogue in our head of, do I tell the truth to this person?
hmm And whatever, or an aspect of truth. What is
Right.
what
A
could be true.
variation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it makes me think about. So I want to dive into the mental health impact,
Mhm.
and let's start with a relationship with us. So I had in the last week after my informal poll of being asked this question, and then also me asking it back.
Yeah.
I'm calling myself out here. I started to think about how many times every day are we dishonoring our own emotional experience by conveying something that isn't true, as you just said,
Perfect transition.
or doesn't meet the intensity of what we are doing. I mean, if we give an answer that isn't actually how we feel, what is the impact of that in
Right.
dishonoring our own emotional experience? That if we don't check in with our feelings, we dismiss whatever we are actually experiencing as unimportant.
Mhm.
We are sending ourselves a message that emotional experience is unimportant. And as many times a day as we all answer the question of how are you with a flippant response, we are dismissing our emotions.
I completely agree with you.
And our emotions aren't only, I think a lot of us think of emotions as reactions or responses to
Mhm.
things but bigger than that, they shape our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs, our relationships, even our overall perspective, our worldview. So of course, I'm thinking about the big mental health impact here around anxiety or depression or even trust of self. If we are i- m- in micro ways throughout the day dishonoring our emotional experience, what would you say to that? What I'm saying isn't real.
Right. And
Effectively.
what you just said too is, think about that. And we say this all the time with any emotion, is feel the feels, right? Feels out loud.
Yeah.
That idea of, just like you said, every time you're dishonoring yourself, but you're also pushing down and not acknowledging really, how you feel.
hmm
Um, and I think there is, which as you were saying it, I was listening, going, oh my gosh, you made me think of something so important, that if we answer truthfully, it means there's a level of vulnerability
Well said.
that
Yes.
we need to give the other person,
Yes, we need to hand it to
right?
them.
Because if they say anything, then good, fine, whatever, um, then oh my gosh, that person is going to see the true me. And like you said, that's not authentic and real.
Yeah.
So then we're not being true to ourselves. And that's just going to keep getting worse, because I guarantee we all keep doing it every single day, not just one day.
Right. Well, you have me thinking about the more we say something out loud, the more it becomes real for us.
Yep.
In our line of work, we talk about mantras all the time in highlighting something, and that as we say it out loud, as we verbalize it, it does get real. So you just had me wondering how this is almost a mantra
Mhm.
of that we aren't even realizing we're using.
That's true.
That telling ourselves we're fine, or dishonoring the emotional experience that might be real for us and not sharing even an aspect of it, how is that a mantra that we are not even aware that we're using, and what the end result of that could be?
Yeah. And that is, if you think about it, how many times though then does that turn into a mantra that we would never want for ourselves, right?
Yeah, I would say we probably, if we externalize it, we wouldn't want it for other people.
Right.
We would want people to feel connected and
Correct. Safe.
Mhm.
Wow.
Well, it makes me think about a second question, and this was
Mhm.
along the lines of our relationship with ourselves. By saying meaningless responses, like "I'm fine,"
Mhm.
"I'm all right," are we also subtly telling ourselves that our day or presence is also meaningless
Oh,
without
well,
thinking about it?
and does that, just like you said, it almost then, if we're not true to ourselves, are we then just going through this mundane schedule every single day that's very prescribed?
hmm
because we are never being true
Mm-hmm.
to ourselves.
Yeah, I believe, and I think you believe this too, Tara, that people want to matter to others around them. And one could make a solid case that if someone is asking us about how we are,
Mm-hmm.
that they might be interested in the answer. We don't know. We need to
We
assess that.
hope.
But what do we do to shift this and not honor our part of ourselves and our response? That we dismiss that and maybe in these micro ways are damaging our sense of personal significance. I tell people all
Wow.
the time, and you just highlighted this maybe a minute ago, no one is owed your story simply because they ask.
Mm.
Nobody is owed that.
Can you say
So
that again?
no one is owed your story simply because they ask.
Mm.
And you mentioned that about your grief journey. And I think in part, it is why the question has gotten diluted.
Mhm.
We don't want to say how we actually are with a stranger
Right.
or with somebody we don't know very well. But
Right.
if we dismiss it, are we saying something about our presence or our personal significance as meaningless? So, is there a possibility that we could think about what a truthful answer is that also reflects a level of self-disclosure that we want to share?
Well, and what you just said about sharing ourselves, of I can understand, and I think a lot of people listening can, I can understand not being vulnerable and sharing yourself with a stranger, right? But then how many times, Becky, I mean, we're a very close-knit, work community.
Yes.
How many times though then do we translate that into our closest relationships, right?
Yes.
So why don't we, okay, fine. If you're going to use that prescribed thing for a stranger, okay. But we don't then switch and go into a more authentic response with the
Yes.
people we're closest to. Why don't we do that?
It's an interesting, it's had me thinking since
Mhm.
I did my little poll.
Yeah.
And that how often through the day am one, I dismissing my personal significance? Two, am I asking the question back that requires somebody to potentially do the same?
Yeah.
And are there facets of the real experience for us that we're willing to share? And it had me thinking about a long time ago. I worked at an organization with a lot of volunteers.
Okay.
And there was one volunteer that would answer really interestingly when I would ask how he was doing. He would say, and he would always wear a different color of pants.
Okay.
So he would say, I got both my legs into my, and let's put blue pants. So I got both my legs into my blue pants this morning, got both my shoes on, and I will make it a good day.
Oh.
So that answer, and I'm using this as an example because that answer didn't tell me a ton of things.
Right.
We didn't know each other that well. He and I were not super close. He was
Right.
not in my inner tier and I wasn't in his. And so certainly I wasn't owed the totality of his thoughts and my questions. It
True.
didn't tell me his life story.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't tell me any physical pains or ailments he had going on, which I knew there were many for him. But it did tell me that he was grateful for his current moment and he was seeking simple joys. I did learn something from that. That was an aspect of truth that he felt comfortable sharing with me. And I could also ask him a question back about his statement. So typically I would say something to him like, well, what kinds of things are you doing to make it a good day? If he had just said to me, doing good, to the
Right.
question of how are you, I don't have the same type of response capacity to follow up.
Right. Right.
So he taught me to try and think about what am I comfortable sharing right now that also feels real?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of an instantaneous reflection of self. What can I share that gives credit to the question, but feels true to how well I know the person?
That balance,
What would
right?
you-
Like you're kind of looking at two things.
Yes. And what would change in our interactions or even brief ways that we would respond to that if we were doing that more often?
Right.
Like what aspect of how I actually am right now, it might not be the totality, but what aspect of this am I okay sharing if somebody does say, how are you?
And I love what you just said, that doesn't have to be totality. It can be one facet. It can be one piece of how I'm feeling today. Right.
Right.
And how, even if we have a kind of a longer hallway at our workplace, and thinking of how many times we pass each other as therapists, like, how are you? And just like the prescribed thing. Even as therapists who feel and express ourselves all day, how often, as I'm thinking, do you just respond with one of those prescribed thing? But what if we each took it upon ourselves and challenged ourselves and said, okay, I'm going to share a little bit of piece of myself
Mhm.
today so they understand.
Mhm.
And that's going to strengthen your relationship and connection, which is all we're
Right.
trying to
I
do
mean,
as humans.
pick any shape.
Yeah.
Any shape is multidimensional.
hmm
We are more than two-dimensional creatures. So
Mhm.
if you share one facet of the shape,
Yep.
it doesn't mean that the other sides don't exist, but you can share that one side. It is
Mhm.
not I share all of it or I share nothing.
Right.
Um,
Someone I know wrote a really great book called Shapes of Us.
that'd be me.
Yeah, it made me
Oh,
think
that's
of
very
that
sweet.
concept though, right?
Right.
Is even in your book, you say like you just saw the corner, right,
Yep.
of a shape,
Yep.
and they were scared to share their whole self.
Yep.
And then in the end, you create this beautiful thing because when the bits and pieces are all shared,
Yeah.
only then do we create something beautiful.
Well, that's a great transition to this third question of the third component on the impact or the uh, consequence of personal mental health is what does your response do to contribute to your own energy level, emotional invalidation, or even your sense of self? When
Mm,
we invalidate ourselves, even in these subtle ways, as you and I are talking about, we downplay our life experiences as if others don't want to know them.
mm,
And we actually send messages to ourselves about our worth. We are making assumptions about what other people want to know or don't want to know. And I
mm.
know it sounds tiny. I know it sounds tiny, everybody, but hear me out that each of these moments tells us something about emotional space we get to take up in the lives of other people.
I love what you just said.
We tell ourselves so frequently that we shouldn't burden people with our feelings and life moments, even when people ask for them.
Mm. Oh my gosh. Think about that and how it applies to therapy. Even when your therapist says it, how many of our clients, or we as clients, because everybody should have a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
how many times do I not answer authentically because it's like, ugh, or also, do I want to go there today?
Do I
Right?
want to? Yes.
Do I want to investigate that part of myself? Um, when you're in a therapeutic environment where you're supposed to go back and forth. And
Yes.
that just it's going to make me think today with all my clients of, are they responding in a way, why are they responding that way?
Yeah. And how often, without maybe even thinking about it, when someone asks us, how are you? That we are automatically responding with, you don't actually want to know who I am. So I'm not going to
Right.
tell you.
Yes.
That we are what would change if we heard that from oh,
Mm.
maybe they're asking because they do actually want to know.
Mhm.
And what part of that am I willing to share, as we just talked
Mhm.
about that. But that I get to take up emotional space. And
And you're deserving of it.
yes. And when I think about my own response to how are you, I said, not bad, not bad. When I actually was really great
You are
that day.
freaking fantastic.
Yeah. So if we use negative words,
Yeah.
do we feel more negative? And the
Mm.
answer
Mhm.
is absolutely yes. Research in psychology has found that the use of negative words releases stress hormones in our brains. Using negative words repeatedly can cause long-term impact on anxiety. So if we answer, how are you, with things that are negative, we reinforce that stress response constantly in our brains. And
That's mind-blowing.
yes. So in me saying not bad, in that moment, I did like about 50 different things to minimize my worth,
Mhm.
invalidate my experience, tell the other myself that the other person didn't want to hear what I had to say, didn't honor my real and true emotional experience of being great, and I said it negatively and did that probably all day long.
Well, and you also, it's one, then the more you are negative, right? The research that you just backed it up. And two, then you can look at it from the perspective of, were you even being truthful then to that person? And it's not that you
Yeah.
were lying,
Yeah.
right, intentionally,
Right.
but you weren't even sharing any semblance of truth.
No. So let's take that and then
Yep.
move into the impact that this phrase, how are you, has on relationships with other people. So I said this at the beginning. I believe we are all trying to connect on even basic levels.
Oh, 100%. As humans, we are.
But this question has been so watered down that can actually have the opposite effect.
Mm,
It can
yes.
send a message that we didn't think about a question that we wanted to ask the person to begin with.
Mm,
So, as you said in our
it's
first segment,
filler.
it's a habitual reaction.
Well, yeah.
Like, it seems like we aren't listening. The kind of, I don't know, I don't really care. You said this. I don't
Mm.
really care, but society makes me feel like I should ask you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what would you say about that in the feeling like we aren't listening?
Right. And and two, it is so easy to not listen if you know what's going to happen, right? If you know the person's going to be like, hey, how are you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, fine. So the person, one, it's like, do you even care? But two, if I take the time to respond, how is that going to be received, right? Because you're catching a lot of people off guard if you respond in an authentic way.
In an authentic way. And we probably are scared to do this when you mentioned vulnerability
Yep.
a couple minutes ago, because how many times have you been answered
Mhm.
or been asked the question and the person didn't even stay long enough to hear an answer?
And they're like walking away as you're answering, even if it's just the word good,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So sad.
That I think every one of us has probably an experience of that question with the other person asking it
Mhm.
and just continuing to move.
Yep.
Or they're doing it and they're actively doing another thing. So we're reading into I'm not really hearing you. I'm not
Right.
really listening.
And then I'm not really caring, right? Like then I feel like the way I'm receiving it is you don't genuinely care about me.
Yeah, and it comes across certainly insincere.
Yep.
Definitely comes across invalidating. And I'm thinking about from a spot of having asked it myself. I'm just gonna call myself out here very quickly that
Love that.
when we ask it, maybe we have our own frustration or irritability because we didn't want the answer and we didn't have time.
This just happened yesterday.
And so we really do need to consider if am I in a place to hear an authentic answer?
Mhm.
Perhaps I shouldn't ask a question I don't want an answer to, but I have to hold myself accountable to that.
But you made a really good point like 15 seconds ago about honoring, but also like, do I have time?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And that's a huge piece. I was at the dollar store yesterday. Yes, love the dollar store. And I had been killing time before an appointment and then had timed it perfectly, right? I'm going to check out and then I'm going to make it on time. I asked the cashier, "Hi, how are you today?"
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it created a 6 to 10 minute response from her.
Yes.
And I learned, I think, 75% of her life story. I was late for the appointment and I left annoyed.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, why am I annoyed? Because she answered my question.
She answered your question.
She just didn't answer it in a way I had time for.
Yes.
So why did I ask it?
Yes. And it makes me think about, well, then we're contributing to the watering down of the question.
For
You know,
sure.
you and I are calling ourselves out here. That the mental health impact, we need to think about ahead of time. What do I actually want to know? Do I really just want to have said hello?
Then just say hello.
Yeah. And is what I want to know answered by how are you? Is there a more effective question? And was where the question got asked, really thinking about the context of where we're asking the question, was where the question got asked a place that would be conducive to someone even sharing an answer?
Oh, that's a really good point. Just location.
Just location.
Wow.
Am I asking somebody in a hallway or at a sink or in an elevator? Or is the spot where I'm asking the question, is it when I want to know, is that the actually answered by how are you? Is there a more effective question? And then where am I? Is this a question to even ask right now?
Right.
Because it has me thinking about, it doesn't need to be a tossable question. How are you doesn't need to be a tossable question. I actually think it's a very sacred question.
I think it is. It's just overused.
Yeah, if we really do want an answer, and if we want to be compassionate, you and I have talked about what can we do? If we want to consider this a really good question, how do we contribute to not watering it down? So It's on both the side of asking it, it's also on the side of answering it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about one thing we can do is check in with ourselves through the day and ask ourselves, how am I in the moment?
Yeah.
If someone asked me right now, what would I say?
What would you say?
And then until my next response or my next question,
Mhm.
use that response. So you ask me,
Yeah.
what would I say
Yeah.
right now? I'd say like, I'm pretty inspired.
Mm.
I feel pretty great. If I've checked in with myself about how am I,
Mhm.
use that response until you ask yourself again,
Mm.
how am I right now? And maybe just check in with yourself a few times during the day.
Mhm.
Use that as a response.
It's a great tip.
Pause before you answer and think about what's real.
Can everybody just do that about every aspect in life? During a conflict, during small talk, during anything, just pause and think about what is real.
Yes. And then on that, when you just said pause and ask what's real, offer a detail about it. Just a simple
Mm.
one
Yeah.
that demonstrates what is influencing how you are. I'm going to say that again. Demonstrate what is influencing how you are. So if someone says, how are you? Say, I'm pretty good. Okay, that's fine. Say, I'm pretty good. I just finished sending out 8 different emails that I had really wanted to get done, and it feels like a huge relief.
Girl, love this.
Because
Love it. And then you're sharing a little bit of yourself.
I'm sharing what's true.
Yeah.
I'm sharing what I did. I might also, totally honest, be feeling completely depleted and hateful of everybody
Heck
around
yeah,
me.
girl.
But I
Yep.
don't have to share that, and that doesn't mean it's not real. It
Right.
doesn't mean that this also still isn't true.
Right.
I can say, I'm pretty good. But then giving somebody something
Mhm.
to ask me a real follow-up question about.
Yep.
The other thing is ask a different question in response.
Mhm.
If someone said, how are you? Make a personal commitment today, everybody. Avoid regurgitating this same thing and start something new.
Don't just say, how are you? Back.
See something around you and ask something that wouldn't get an automatic response. Surprise somebody. Ask like, how would you describe your moment right now?
Mhm.
What new thing has been part of your day today? Tell me something exciting about you right now. Tell me about your moment. I say that a lot. Tell me about your moment.
Oh, I say to people, instead of how are you, I say to all my clients and some friends, I say, how are you right now? In this moment, how are you right now?
Mhm.
And that allows a lot of clients to be able to go, wow, because if you ask me, how are you? They are so overwhelmed sitting
Yep.
on that couch. But if you just say, how are you right now?
How are you right? Yes, because it gives them also a context
Yes.
of
Okay, how am I feeling? Body or, self-check.
yeah, in what way
Right.
you're saying right
Yep.
this moment.
Yep.
Yeah, well, it makes me think about I was recently in a parking ramp. I was paying the attendant who said to me, "How are you today?" This was actually after my informal poll.
Okay.
And I said, so I'm trying to respond with what's true. I'm challenging myself to all the things you and I've talked about. I said, I'm very inspired right now, just like what I actually said to you a second ago.
That.
I just had an amazing conversation, is what I said. And then I said, what has inspired you today?
Okay, hold the phone.
That's what I said back.
Hang on. What did her nonverbals convey when you said, what has inspired you today?
Uh-huh. Her eyes got huge.
Right?
Her eyes
so
got huge.
unexpected.
Yes. And she offered an answer that likely frustrated this huge line of cars behind me.
Guess what? It's fine.
Growingly long line of cars. And she sat back in her chair. Her eyes got huge and told me all about this really cool pasta dish that she had made and how she added corn to it. And then she said the most amazing thing, Tara. She said this, I think I need to ask someone else this question today. And I felt like we have an opportunity to start a revolution.
I mean, we really, really do.
If everyone listening to this show relegates, how are you? For the moments when we really do want to hear and know how someone is, because it's a sacred question, everybody, and then have the ability to feel it right along with them, we can make a big change.
That makes me want to cry. I don't know why. That is so profound. And think of that woman in the parking ramp little booth. How many times she hears, how are you today? right?
Probably hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yes.
And for you to take the time and not just say, and how are you even in this moment, right? Even
Mhm.
like a little bit. What has inspired you today?
Mhm.
Girl, you rocked her world in the most amazing way.
And together, everybody
Yeah.
who's listening to this show, we will stop watering this phrase down and save it for when it matters most, because it does matter.
Mm-hmm.
And for the times that we use it out of habit or not knowing what else to say, we can collectively commit right now to trying to say something else.
I love this.
We will all say together that we want more from connection. And so we promise to show up differently on our side with what we ask the world around us. So I'm thinking about, like, first, if we ask the question, how are you? Listen for the answer.
Mhm. And really listen and show them that you care and are listening.
Yes.
This is to put you on the spot because this is nowhere in the plan for what we're going to talk about today, but you ask an incredible question instead of how are you? You use it all the time in the office.
Okay.
What color is your world today?
Oh, I do. Do
Girl.
Mm-hmm. What color is your world?
So amazing.
In asking people to consider their life as metaphor frequently,
Yeah.
they get to decide whatever color means something to them.
Yeah.
But it is a way to get at this idea of sharing of ourselves without having to be verbally vulnerable.
Right.
I don't have to know what gold or blue or purple mean,
Yep.
but I can ask to follow it up with. And it's so interesting that you bring that up, because it gets at this idea of when we ask a question that is unexpected in response to people, they are sort of jolted from the robotic nature of interaction,
which is so not authentic.
That habitual response that almost feels like a reaction, and we're all used to that. It's sort of the droning of the day, that they're tasked all of a sudden to the moment, and then they're thinking about what you say. Now, I've asked the question, what color is your world today? Or what color do you feel right now? We did a show about intensity and colors weeks ago.
Right.
And that's something I do frequently. Sometimes I get looks of like, that's the weirdest question I've heard. All the way to, I've never thought about that. But without fail, I get people who all of a sudden are in their moment thinking about that question. They're thinking about that question. And so we do have opportunity to, ahead of time, think about reserving greetings for greetings. Reserve greetings for greetings. If you want to just say hello, that's okay.
Yeah.
Say hello.
Yeah.
And look someone in the eye as you do it. And don't ask a question if you aren't the one to receive it.
Yep.
But then ahead of time, think about, how could I build up my repertoire of questions to ask strangers that feels right for you? It could be, I'm a metaphoric and color person, so it could be that. Feel free to use it, but you don't have to wait till you're in the moment with somebody to think about, what's a different question that I could ask people?
Well, right. And that goes back to what you said earlier about the timepiece, right? Is that if you're listening to this episode, you have the time, right, to sit and reflect a bit, like, oh, how would I respond, or what question could I ask? Where if you wait until that person's literally approaching you, it may also cause you to panic and kind of get off. Where do it when you have time. Just kind of think about it and reflect.
Yeah, the question development, I think if we challenge ourselves, part of the reason we ask it is because we don't know what else to ask. And part of the reason that we're asking it back is we are in a moment where we're not sure then what to say.
Oh, for sure.
That it's like, well, I'm just offering you the nicety back to you, but I don't really know what else to say.
Right.
I absolutely love this.
I'm obsessed with this topic.
We're gonna answer your questions, listener questions, on changing the dialogue of empty questions when we get back from this commercial break. It's so much to think about. Feels Out Loud will process your thoughts in just a moment.
You gotta find the people.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through questions from you all, our listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you'd like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page and submit a question directly, or you can email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. We do truly want to hear from you and what you are wondering about, so ask those questions.
And we got so many questions about this phrase, how are you? And then some other sort of what we call empty questions, the things that we're not really sure what they mean.
Yep.
So a huge thank you to the people who have reached out to us and asked us some questions and had some comments about it. One of the questions that we got was, what are some new ways to answer?
Which is such a good question because this applies to every human.
Yeah. So if we are looking to make a really simple change, we can't necessarily control that people are going to ask us this question. But what we can do is change our simple responses. And as we mentioned in the last segment, what honors the moment, what can share something that's real, what can express a vulnerability that I'm willing to share with how well I know the person. So we have a lot of choices here. And one of my thoughts is, maybe first, when somebody says, how are you? Think about it as a sacred question. Maybe.
I bet you it started as a sacred question.
I bet it did. And so think to yourself, pause, think to yourself, how well do I know the person? What do I want to share? So ask yourself some things. Do that check-in, like I mentioned in the last segment, of how am I right now? I'm going to share that until I've checked in with myself next. But what are some ways to answer the question? One of them, just start saying so grateful. If
you mean it.
If you mean it. And if we look at that, saying negative words has negative impact on us. What changes in your sense of self, in your experience of worth, if what you start to do every day on a very micro level is say, I'm not going to reinforce negativity in my life.
No.
If I already get enough, which, hey, everybody, we do.
Yeah.
We do.
Yep.
And we're going to listen to other people answer this in an entirely negative way, but we can choose not to. And we can say, I already get that enough of the time. I'm not going to reinforce it. So grateful. You give somebody an opportunity then to say, about what? Or,
yeah, you do.
Any adjective. Respond with any adjective, a descriptor of your day. Good actually really isn't a descriptor.
I was just going to say, maybe other than good or fine.
So you mentioned in the last segment, a color. Right. That's a descriptor. Yep. Well, it's a blue day. How are you today? Feeling purple.
Yep.
Take any descriptor and then describe that about your day. Tara, you frequently say, live in the dream.
I mean, I really do. And yes, I mean it sarcastically sometimes. Yeah. Right. Live in the dream.
Live in the dream. And humors can be a great way to respond to a how are
or
you?
Avoid.
Or avoid.
But I would say, if you asked me today, I wouldn't go live in the dream. I would say I am living the dream. Well, and it's all about that delivery piece because today's a good day. Right?
And I believe that there is always an aspect of you that feels you are right now, which is part of why I bring it up. That even if in a day where the dimensional nature of you is also having other feels,
right?
And there is duality of that you do feel like you are living the dream in some ways.
Yeah, and that is very true. And a little tip for listeners, if you're like, well, I have no idea, how do I begin thinking of ones? Answer in a using a weather-related word. I'm cloudy. I'm partly sunny today.
Yes.
I'm a tsunami today.
Yes.
I'm, whatever it is. And that is, other than using a color, that's an illustrative way to express yourself.
Without having to say the words of what you are.
I'll ask that with just even like the little preschoolers I work with every week, because they know what's sunny, cloudy, stormy.
Well, We are already at the end of our show for today. Thank you, Tara, for listening. And thank you to our listeners for listening this morning. Join us next week as we talk about all things active listening and how it contributes to mental wellness. Remember, connection fosters wellness. Your voice is one the world around you needs to hear, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Down low, we go from the floor.